This video is sponsored by Nebula, the thoughtful streaming service created by me and my creator friends. Check out the link in the description or stay tuned to learn more. In London, I've talked about the Tube and I've talked about the Elizabeth line, but even more important to London than either of these are its suburban rail lines, which form one of the most complex networks in the world, and it extends far from London into a regional and intercity network and moves millions of people every day. A big reason I've not done a video explaining the suburban railways of London before is because they're extremely hard to tackle. There are numerous operators, even more numerous lines, and hundreds upon hundreds of stations, and since these networks stretch across much of the country, deciding how much to cover and where to draw the line is a real challenge. So why even do it? Well, when you navigate the London Underground and transport for London services more broadly, you benefit immensely from the iconic wayfinding system that started in London and took over the world. There are all kinds of resources that will help you understand the lines and branches of the original rapid transit system. But what do we get for suburban, regional, and intercity trains? It's all national rail. Without a single operator, or even unified branding, major terminal station, or consistent line naming system, your best bet is to open up a copy of the rail and tube map and start praying. And it's not like this is entirely necessary. Berlin and Paris show examples of how you can use various names and codes to classify suburban and regional trains, and in Tokyo, lines are named, just like on the tube. So I wanted to make a video to make sense of this confusing morass, and hopefully also bring some clarity and get you up with the basics of London suburban railways. So let's go. Welcome to RM Transit, a channel with explainers of the world's most complex transportation systems. If you enjoyed the channel, consider supporting on Patreon. London suburban trains extend in almost all conceivable directions from the city, and some services extend as much as 100 kilometers from the center and beyond, making the scope of the network absolutely enormous. And just comparing London's rail network to other big cities like Berlin or New York can give you a sense for just how incredibly dense it is. That network, particularly of inner suburban lines, is also weighted to the south of London, which makes sense as the north of London has far more underground coverage. In this video, I won't talk much about specific lines or services, but I'll give you a sense for the different subnetworks, operators, and terminals which the railways run into within London, and as they head out of the city, giving you a solid foundation to go deeper on specific corridors and lines. There's a ton to absorb here, as the terminals in London show you how the city was shaped, and the railway operators are a smorgasbord of international and domestic transit companies, often working together, from Deutsche Bahn to JR East, Trenitalia, Keolis, MTR, and First Group. These operators run trains by way of train operating companies as part of different franchises, which correspond to baskets of services on interconnected or related parts of the network, such as Great Western, East Anglia, and Essex Thameside. Altogether, these rail services all fall under the National Rail banner, which encompasses rail, which is national, and manages ticketing, and run on tracks owned and maintained by Network Rail, the rail infrastructure body for Great Britain. Within the London region, passengers don't necessarily need to use tickets though, and they can instead opt for an Oyster card or contactless. An easy first note to make is about the electrification and gauge of the system. All of London's suburban railways are built to standard gauge and adhere to the restrictive British loading gauge that's similar to what you see on the subsurface London Underground lines. That means you won't see any double-decker trains in London, unlike on suburban railways the world over. That is, unless it's decided to start running them on HS1. Electrification is slightly more complicated. To the south of London, probably owing to the influence of early underground lines as well as early electrification, third rail was widely used, and now is essentially universal on suburban lines south of the Thames, where tracks are almost always flanked by a 750-volt DC third rail that makes top contact with trains. The sole exceptions to this are along High Speed 1, which does carry some select outer suburban trains for Southeastern north of the Thames to St Pancras, which naturally use high-speed appropriate catenary while on the high-speed line before changing modes when they exit it, and on select bits of the Southwestern network that pop north of the Thames west of London. To the north of London, national railway lines are mostly electrified with more modern 25 kV AC overhead wires, although a small number of diesel services do still run on Chiltern railways into London Marylebone. Thameslink trains actually use both parts of this network, and so they are, like the Southeastern high-speed trains, dual power. Now, there are a lot of ways you could orient a discussion of London's suburban railways, from the geographic direction to the color of trains, and I'm going to start with the cross-city rail routes and their associated feeder railways, then move on to the dense suburban network in London South, and finish up with the remaining London terminals, that typically see rail services from a certain geographic direction funneled into them. Along the way, I'll mention the London airports, which are exceptionally well served by rail, and that should give you a rough sense of what direction various lines head out of the city in. Unlike Paris with its 5 RER lines, London only has 2 cross-city routes, Thameslink and the Elizabeth line, so an overwhelming majority of trains terminate at various stations near central parts of the city, namely Paddington, Marylebone, Euston, King's Cross St Pancras, Moorgate, Liverpool Street, Fenchurch Street, Cannon Street, Charing Cross and London Bridge, Waterloo and Victoria. There are also London overground services, many of which are orbital, but some, like the Lee Valley lines, now the Weaver line, and the Watford DC line, now the Lioness line, end at London terminals. The Elizabeth line, or Crossrail, is still fresh in many of our minds. This lovely line that opened in 2022 and was attended by yours truly connects TfL-branded suburban trains east-west across London, from Reading and Heathrow to Shenfield and Abbey Wood. The western leg of the Elizabeth line and the tracks that the trains run on travel into and under Paddington Station, with the Elizabeth line heading into tunnels about a kilometre to the station's west. Paddington is probably my favourite terminal in London, and it serves the Great Western Railway franchise, operated by Great Western Railway, which serves, albeit more lightly post-Elizabeth line, suburbs to the west of London like Slough and Maidenhead, as well as destinations further west like Reading and much of the southwest of England as well as southern Wales. There's also the Greenford Shuttle, which heads from West Ealing up north to Greenford. While Paddington isn't all that close to central London, it is quite close to the lovely Hyde Park. While at Paddington, it only makes sense to mention the Heathrow Express, which is a frequent and at 110 miles per hour or 177 kilometers per hour, possibly the fastest regular airport express train in the world, but a rather poor value due to the high ticket prices and the fact that, again, Paddington isn't in central London. The Heathrow Express heads into tunnels it shares with Elizabeth line trains under Heathrow about 20 kilometers west of the city. And Heathrow Express isn't the only airport express service in London. There's also the Gatwick Express into London Victoria and the Luton Airport Express from St Pancras International. These both actually travel beyond their respective airports as regional services, and both airports are also served by Thameslink. The Stansted Express into London Liverpool Street also exists, though it doesn't actually run express and is a comparatively long journey, and for the record, London Southend is also served by Greater Anglia, albeit just with regular train services. Gatwick has a giant surface railway station basically right at its southern terminal, while Luton has a cable-hauled people mover called the Dart to its train station, whereas both Stansted and Southend have stations right at their terminals. The southeastern branch of the Elizabeth line runs to Abbey Wood, a station mostly served naturally by South Eastern Railway, that we'll touch on later, while the main eastern branch to Shenfield runs along a corridor feeding into Liverpool Street on the local tracks, adjacent to express tracks populated with trains from Greater Anglia, which operates the East Anglia franchise, also serving Chelmsford, Southend, and much of the east of England, and travelling to the north from both Liverpool Street and Stratford to Enfield, Harlow, and Stansted. While like at Paddington, some select Elizabeth line trains do terminate at the surface platforms of Liverpool Street, most travel underground just west of Stratford to Whitechapel, before passing through the new underground platforms between Liverpool Street and Moorgate, which is right next door. Speaking of Moorgate, it only makes sense to transition over to London's second cross-city railway, Thameslink, which I covered in a video earlier this year and serves Cambridge and Peterborough, which are on the tracks out of King's Cross, and Bedford on the tracks out of St Pancras, as well as various destinations to the south of London such as Brighton, using a pieced-together north-south cross-city route with handsome electric multiple-unit trains from Siemens. Now, Thameslink does not actually run trains into Moorgate, but its operating company, Govia Thameslink Railway, does, under the Great Northern franchise, and the trains are of the same model as those used on Thameslink. North of Finchley Park, Great Northern runs stopping trains to both Cambridge and Peterborough, alongside Thameslink and up to Letchworth. To be clear, Moorgate is not really a traditional rail terminus, and instead is just the southern end of the Northern City Line, which feels rather tube-like, and was travelled by Jeff Marshall and I in a video last year. As it turns out, King's Cross St Pancras also serves both Great Northern and with the station created under St Pancras International, Thameslink. Great Northern and Thameslink services via the canal tunnels run onto the same lines out of King's Cross as the services from Moorgate, although Thameslink also runs to Bedford and Luton alongside East Midlands Railway services out of St Pancras. That being said, most of the capacity into King's Cross and St Pancras is used for long-distance trains to the north of England, as well as Eurostar services on HS1 and the dual-mode Southeastern Javelin regional services. On the other end of central London, Thameslink trains run out to Blackfriars to various suburban railway lines in South London, and to London Bridge. London Bridge, with its relatively recent overhaul, feels like London's nicest and most modern terminal station, although like Ueno Station in Tokyo, it also features a large number of through tracks, allowing some trains serving the station to pass through and beyond it, either to Blackfriars in the case of Thameslink, or to the terminals at Cannon Street or Charing Cross for trains under the Southeastern franchise, with trains to Charing Cross passing through the elevated Waterloo East, which is connected to the main Waterloo terminus station through a number of wacky pedestrian bridges. If you've ever wondered what's up with the crazy series of rail viaducts and flyovers in south-central London, these are used to distribute trains passing through London Bridge from Thameslink and Southeastern to Blackfriars and Cannon Street as well as Charing Cross respectively, while also allowing Thameslink trains from other southern branches to cross trains headed to Charing Cross without conflict. The network south of London is extremely complicated, and its three main operators, Southeastern and Southwestern, which can be confusing as they are both franchises and operators like Great Western, as well as Southern, which is also part of Go via Thameslink Railway, all overlap to some extent. While the lines to the north of London generally only run out in a radial pattern, sometimes branching and rarely connecting with one another, for example services into Paddington don't connect and interoperate with service into Euston, and those from St Pancras don't really intermingle with those out of Liverpool Street, in South London there are tons of interconnections, lines heading in every direction and loops of tracks enabling several potential rail journeys to a wide variety of stations. All of this complexity means that while there are a ton of different suburban rail services operated in South London offering one-seat rides between many stations, most of them are not particularly frequent. Most services run half-hourly, and while there are places where overlapping services make things a bit better, few full corridors get better than 2 trains per hour. Southeastern Railway services are effectively split into 2 separate overlapping networks, with services either headed into Cannon Street or Charing Cross through London Bridge, and trains begin branching about 2 kilometers southeast of London Bridge. Heading out of Cannon Street by way of London Bridge are services to Dartford via Greenwich and Abbey Wood via Lewisham, which can also loop back to London via either Bexleyheath or Sidcup, and there are also services to Orpington. From Charing Cross via London Bridge are routes to Dartford via Bexleyheath, Sidcup, as well as to Sevenoaks and Hayes by way of Lewisham. There's also a tiny shuttle service from Grove Park to Bromley North with 1 intermediate stop. London's Waterloo is the most awe-inspiring terminal of them all, and has historically been the busiest station in the UK, with tons of long-distance services to South and Southwestern England. The station is the hub for services from Southwestern Railway and has a long and wide approach that runs nearly 6 kilometers from Clapham Junction via Vauxhall. Unlike, say, London Bridge or Victoria, only Southwestern trains call it Waterloo. Southwestern has services to Epsom, Chessington, Guildford, Woking, and Hampton Court, as well as services that cross north of the Thames to Shepperton by way of either Kingston or Richmond, and to Staines and Reading via either Richmond or Hounslow. Victoria, which is served primarily by Southern, might be my least favourite London terminus, and it feels a bit like Paddington South, situated in Westminster a few blocks from Buckingham Palace. Like with Liverpool Street, a good chunk of the approach tracks to Victoria have been built over. From here, Southern trains head out to a wide variety of lines south of London, including to Epsom, where they meet with Southwestern trains, Sutton and Epsom Downs via either Mitcham or West Croydon via either Norbury or Crystal Palace, and East Croydon again via either Norbury or Crystal Palace. Beyond East Croydon, trains head to East Grinstead, Whiteleaf, Kingswood, and Brighton, as well as Gatwick, which is of course the route of the Gatwick Express service. Gatwick is rather unique in that its station, which is right at the South Terminal, is right on the Brighton Main Line, so it receives a ton of service not only from Southern and the Gatwick Express, but also Thameslink. There are also select Southern trains which ironically head north of London to Watford and beyond from East Croydon. Things are even more complicated though because Southeastern actually runs some limited services into Victoria, which either head to Dartford via Denmark Hill, cutting across South London, to Beckenham Junction by way of Herne Hill and Brixton. What enables all of this intermixing? Well, once trains have crossed the Thames south of Victoria, they cross over the approach tracks to Waterloo, which involves an incredibly complex grade-separated junction that allows Southern trains to go out towards Clapham Junction and the majority of the Southern network, Southeastern trains to head south to Brixton and Denmark Hill, Southern trains to go from Victoria and the main Southern network to the West London line, and trains from Waterloo, most notably Eurostar back in the day, to head to Brixton and Denmark Hill or the West London line. To be clear though, different services do run isolated from one another, and this is enabled by the infrastructure. Connectivity just does also exist. And if you thought the confusion was over, Southern also has select services to London Bridge, which travel either to West Croydon or Beckenham Junction, which, fun fact, is only served by Southeastern services to Southern's terminus at Victoria or Southern services to Southeastern's terminal at London Bridge. While Thameslink only has 3 northern branches, it has a ton to the south of London, including Rainham via Greenwich and Dartford, and various points south via East Croydon for the London Bridge trains. And the Sutton Loop, which is partially along the southern line through Mitcham and partially adjacent to the southwestern line through Wimbledon, as well as services to Orpington and Sevenoaks via Denmark Hill for the Elephant and Castle trains. Finishing up the remaining suburban services are several more minor suburban railways north of London. West Midland Trains run services out of Euston under the London North Western Railway brand, including commuter services to Harrow, Watford and beyond. Euston is a more significant hub for long-distance trains to Wales, Scotland, Manchester and the West Midlands, as well as hopefully HS2 at some point. Meanwhile, Chiltern Railways runs diesel services out of London Marylebone to High Wycombe and Aylesbury, crossing over the tracks out of Euston twice. Finally, we have C2C and Fenchurch Street, arguably the most underrated train service and the most understated terminal in London. C2C, which I've always thought of as City to Sea even if coast is more correct, services run out to Shoebury Ness and Southend-on-Sea by way of Horndon and Tilbury. Now, the final suburban rail lines in London are formed by the London Overground Network, whose lines have recently received new names and which operate over the National Rail Network throughout London, connecting various other services. The entirety of the London Overground is electrified with a mix of 750-volt DC third rail and 25kV AC overhead lines. 2 of the London Overground's lines are radial services operating out of London Termini. The Lioness line from Euston runs up to Watford alongside the West Midlands train services, while the Weaver line, or more accurately lines, which were previously part of the East Anglia franchise, run from Liverpool Street up through Hackney to Chingford, Enfield Town and Cheshunt, which is along Greater Anglia's network. The rest of the Overground provides orbital service, with the Liberty Line, formerly the Upminster to Romford Shuttle, connecting Greater Anglia, Elizabeth Line, and C2C services in the northeast of the city. The Suffragette Line, formerly the Gospel Oak to Barking Line, cutting across northern and eastern London, and connecting into the new Barking Riverside Station with connections on the way to C2C, the Elizabeth Line, Greater Anglia, and Weaver Line services. The Mildmay Line, formerly the North London Line, which runs across North and West London from Stratford to Richmond and Clapham Junction, connecting Southwestern, Southern, the Lioness Line, Thameslink, the Suffragette Line, Great Northern, the Weaver Line, the Elizabeth Line, and Greater Anglia services. And finally, the Windrush Line, formerly known as the East London Line, which runs from Highbury and Islington to New Cross, West Croydon, and Clapham Junction, connecting to the Mildmay Line, Great Northern, the Elizabeth Line, Southeastern, Southern, Thameslink, and Southwestern rail services along the way. And with that, you have London's suburban railways, their electrification, operators, London terminals, and interconnections with one another, the Elizabeth Line, Thameslink, and the London Overground. Together, along with perhaps Tokyo, they form what is probably the most complex railway network in the world, and they can teach you so much. However, if you want to learn more about how the suburban railways come together with the London Underground, trams, and DLR to serve the urban core and provide even more connections and useful links, you'll want to check out this bonus video I've made, which is available exclusively on Nebula right now. Nebula is the streaming platform owned by me and my creator friends, featuring over 14,000 titles that you can watch ad-free, including exclusive and early access videos from urbanist creators like myself, Life Where I'm From, City Nerd, City Beautiful, as well as Not Just Bikes. And recently, Nebula has actually welcomed some of its biggest updates ever. The site has a new layout with friendly categories for all of your favorite content creators, new and old, so you can binge urbanism content all day every day at the click of a button. We've also launched a news division and a film studio, where some of the very best content creators like Tom Nicholas and Patrick H. Willems are creating excellent large-scale projects you won't be able to find anywhere else, and I'm super excited to check out The Baltimore Scandal, a new documentary from Bobby Broccoli. Supporting me on Nebula is one of the best ways you can support my channel and my content as a whole, and as of now, lifetime memberships are back indefinitely for just $300, so you can pay once and get Nebula for as long as both you and Nebula exist. So Nebula can fund bigger projects in the near future, and if lifetime memberships are not your cup of tea, you can still support me for as little as $2.50 a month with our annual plans, so go check out Nebula at go.nebula.tv/rmtransit right now.